Hi there and welcome. Thank you once again for joining us here on YouTube as we do a little presentation. This is Father Marcus from the Costa Blanca Anglican Chaplaincy, and we hope and pray that you're feeling okay and that you're managing with all the restrictions that are continuing to be in place. We're very conscious that we're trying to be church in our separate places, and one of the things that this video is endeavouring to do is to form links between us and to build connection. The readings that we're going through at the moment in church during the week and on Sundays are from John's Gospel, the Gospel reading, and they're very much about the whole concept of love and how much we are loved by God. And elsewhere, we didn't hear it today, but elsewhere in John's Gospel, John describes God with a definition. He says, God is love. And love is at the very heart of who we are and what we do and what we try to embrace. And you know this, I'm not teaching you anything new, but sometimes it's quite hard for us to embrace the enormity of the love of God when our lives are in confusion and distress. And let's be honest, this seems to have been going on for a long time now. Many of us are feeling weary and feeling battered by it, and we're not feeling great and we're not feeling lovely, perhaps in the way that we should do. And yet, when we read the scriptures and when we reflect on them, love is very much still at the very heart of what we're called to be and do, and at the heart of God's presence with us. And so, how do we make sense of that? And I think, for me, what helps us make sense of it is the whole concept of grace. Grace is the unearned and undeserved blessing that comes from God. It's his presence in a way which we can't manufacture, but we receive. It's a gift. And the beautiful thing about God's grace is it doesn't go where we plan for it to go or where we want it to go or as a response to something that we do, but it goes where God chooses to pour it. So much so that God's grace can make the unrighteous righteous. And it goes where God chooses to send it. And one of the things that does, it allows us to see God at work where our human frame doesn't anticipate it to be. And one of the things that does for me is allow me to focus on the love of God in my life, even when it's tough. We're getting restless, we're getting anxious, we're getting confused. There's mixed messages all over the place, and we'd like things to be very different. And one of the things you've noticed on some of these videos I've been doing recently is that we've picked up on some words from hymns. And one of the hymns we would have had in church this weekend is that beautiful modern hymn, Such Love. To be honest, I'm not a huge fan of verse 1. Let me just say that, throw that out there. But verse 2 is just incredible. I'm not a great singer, but it says, such love stilling my restlessness, such love filling my emptiness, such love showing me holiness. Oh Jesus, such love. And that for me is so incredible, because we find all sorts of things going on in our hearts and minds at the moment, and we find ourselves perhaps a little bit swamped with a sense of restlessness. And our faith tells us that Jesus can fill that restlessness and can still it and can stop it and can bring calm to it and can bring a sense of peace. And it's having that sense of grace and that sense of faith which allows us to accept that. And I believe that's the important thing, allowing us to accept in good grace that God is still part of our lives and still giving us blessings and still giving us his presence and still giving us bits of joy, moments of laughter, moments of fun. And perhaps it's only when we reflect on the grace of God that we give ourselves the freedom to accept that. We're struggling with issues at the moment about how and when to open our churches and get back to communion. And it's proving an awful lot more difficult than we would all hope for. We would love just to flock back to church and everything would be okay, but the virus is still around, and people are very vulnerable, and there are all sorts of issues and all sorts of guidance that are suggesting that we be cautious and we don't rush back. And we're longing to be in church and receive that grace that comes from communion. And for the time being, at least, we're going to rely on that spiritual communion that comes when we reflect on the Eucharist, but we can't receive it in person. And this is, I believe, something where allowing the grace of God to be at work in us is so important. All this talk about grace reminds me of that lovely hymn, Amazing Grace. And so I want to take us to the last verse of that one. And again, I'm not going to sing it, but I'm going to read it to you. When we've been there 1,000 years, bright shining as a sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. The grace of God allows us to know that there isn't a sense of urgency in order that we can sing God's praise. There isn't a sense of urgency in having to do something in order that we can receive his love or his grace or the practicality of his sacrament. It will come, and when it does, we've all the time in the world left in our lives to anticipate it and celebrate it. And when our lives come to an end, we will be with God face to face, receiving that grace for eternity. So let's not rush. Let's not put ourselves or other people in positions of risk just so that we can receive something that, in a sense, at least, we're already embracing. It's a tough time, and I know that, but maybe we need to receive this toughness, this restlessness, this confusion and this pain in good grace. Yes, I believe so. Bless you, bless you, bless you. And until next time, peace.